what do you think is the philosopher's greatest fear?
I think a philosopher's greatest fear is that he'll reach a certain amount of knowledge, of wisdom, that will be unusable. Like you know so much that like you belong to the future, in a sense, and it's a future that might not happen even. So it's a terrifying thing.
That makes sense. I was asking myself this question yesterday and came up with the first, most obvious, kind of superficial fear would be that it's, pointless, that it's about nothing, that it's, I think this is, many people who go into philosophy, in the end, succumb to this fear, to the idea that, that it's not real life. But I don't know if that's a proper fear.
I've never had that. Since I read Parmenides and the pre-Socratics that I did read early on, there was just no question in my mind. This is an academic fear. Like, this is the fear of Kant's and Hegel's and...
No, exactly. Yeah. But this came to me first. I think I at least sense the presence of this fear near or in other philosophers.
Definitely, but I think it's that maybe is what separates like a philosopher from someone that is using philosophy like a drug, like something to escape the moment. Because I've had that fear maybe with drugs, that what I'm about to go through won't have any grounding in, so to speak, real life. With philosophy, I've never had that because by definition, it works like the Leibniz definition of why God exists, because by definition, he exists. Well, philosophy exists because, and it's the most important thing because by definition, it is the most important thing. To say that the search and love for wisdom isn't impeccably always worthful is to say that it's better not to live and like life is better to just... It's nihilism, really, I guess.
It is either that or it's just the idea that wisdom is sort of indirectly practical actions, or that cooking or stuff, or physical, the wisdom is never beyond the practical.
But yeah, maybe, okay, so I do understand that fear and where it comes from, but that's why one thing that's always separated me from other thinkers I've encountered is that I've never seen them as separate things. If philosophy can't touch cooking, then it's not philosophy, it's babbling. If philosophy doesn't directly relate to just any material action, it's not philosophy, it's just, I don't even know what that is. Well, I understand it's very common. It's...
What? So yeah, you mentioned people like Kant. He's not about cooking.
No. You would have seen cooking as below him.
Yeah, Nietzsche is obviously about taste, so cooking would be one of the most important things.
That's what took me about Nietzsche. That it's always visceral with him. He makes the highest things visceral. And then I was like, no other form of thinking is worthwhile. I already suspected it, but when I read him writing it out, it was such a, like, damn, I feel such a, like, God, Nietzsche motherfucker, you know what I'm saying? Like,
no, yes, he is, like, it's a weird thing to have a friend like that. He's dead, but more alive than, most humans. So this is, it's maybe philosophy is about, it's not such a good question about fear, because it's basically a very fearless enterprise.
Nietzsche Nietzsche spoke a lot about fear. Like he was afraid of a great many things very deeply. And he spoke about the philosopher as one who is afraid of himself and will run from himself, eventually have to return to himself inevitably. You run from your philosophy. Philosophy itself is what's scary.
But power. Yes, that is true. It's either scary or like ecstatic, too much, too beautiful to understand or to accept that it's real.
Or to connect with the circumstances of what some people will call the real life. That this thing, if anything, real life it's the onus is upon real life to live up to philosophy, actual philosophy. Not how many angels can dance on the etc.
And this is, I think, this whole fear. So Parodites' idea about how the mind itself came to be, the human psyche came to be. It's an extremely fearsome notion, not fearful, fearsome. So I guess it suggests that the whole psyche, the ground of it is pure madness, which is terrifying, really horrible. Like there must have been thousands of years of extreme violence without any notions, and notions being born just to, because they would be preferable to the violence at one point. So maybe
the intricacy maybe of like the gore, like
how you mean notions coming from the intricacy of gore?
No, I mean notions are preferable to how intricate the different levels of like hell in a sense are.
Yeah, but also just how there's no peace, and in a notion you can find some peace, or you can return to it. Whereas in the mayhem of pure, this is what I discovered in this when I had this psychotic sort of breakdown, that there was no me, there was no notion, there was only a terrifying state that doesn't even refer to anything besides it there being only a terrifying state. So there's this horrible spiral of terror that increases. And then, and then the terrifying thing is that I noticed you can hold on to any random notion, any random name basically, and this is then all your mind is. The only thing is, so I had this name of my film school teacher that sort of, and that was the terrible thing. That's
it's like the banality of psychosis.
It still scares me if I think that's the one thing in my mind that I didn't want to mention it, the name of because that's where it started. That's where I realized I have no control over. If you truly look into the mind, you completely lose control of it. This is why I think the Buddhists or the Zen people and everything, they want to abandon. To recede away from the mind.
Yeah. So I mean, there's a lot of Nietzschean concepts here, but in a sense, sublimation. I mean, in a sense, I think what's really scary maybe about philosophy is that we all understand and maybe Sauvelius, when he says that the philosopher is the Uberman, he's suggesting the fact that the philosopher is heading straight for the main nerve, that thing where everything else apart from it is mistake. And the philosopher obviously knows that most of life, most of society is mistake. But it's a beautiful thought that this thing that everything else is a mistake under or of came from just the need to kind of take control of the violence and take a step away from the violence.
Yeah, and to even, he says also to, this is the thing he quoted, so Elias in this one thread, or linked to, about how Nietzsche said that culture, anything that becomes meaningful is grounded in repetition of many silly, basically acts or processes that don't mean anything in themselves, but because of the discipline something is created in the person who disciplines himself by that. So then we get to the notion again that there are no words that actually matter, I suppose.
But they matter more when you realize this.
I like that. But of course poets do realize this.
Of course. Poets are the ultimate realizers of this.
And also in the other sense, the runes are also, they're not, they are words.
No, runes aren't words.
Well,
runes are direct symbols. I mean, sure.
No, the words sort of symbolize the symbol.
They are it's like their language, their words of gods. So it's not as free as human words, because gods aren't that dynamic. Gods are more, they have their energy set up, and that's it. So the symbol is not as free floating as any word that is.
No, it's not like a normal word is like I guess a leaf in the breeze or something, and a rune is definitely drawn in the earth, and it's just there. But I mean, a word I won't mean that it opens up in the same sense. It's like the ultimate opening upward. If you speak it, like, or you draw it, you speak it, and then the act itself, it doesn't signify. I mean, it's too big or too central to signify anything in particular. But then things start happening, cognitive processes or emotional processes. So those are definitely not words. That's true.
I could agree with that. If runes are drawn in the earth, words, human words, so to speak, man words are clay more. Like there's this thing that we reference points that we decide. So in a sense, runes are like the refutation of this idea of the eternal truth behind a word. It's so silly, a concept that a god laughs at it by making a word much more certain in a sense, and yet it is also not universal. It's very much not universal. Like
exactly, that is what it does so beautifully, the runes, and why it's so much better for me than the more hermetic, for example, the Kabbalah, which is extremely powerful, but it wants a completeness. That system aims for a micro and a macrocosmos to be combined into a sort of gem, a perfect diamond, and it actually very much works like that. But that means it also excludes a lot.
Malleability in a way. But that's what's so fantastic about Israel, that the God commands that you seek this hermetism. You will never find it because you're not God, but he demands nothing less. So Kabbalah will never reach this perfection it looks for, but in the seeking makes something so powerful that it's very, very, very sublime.
We have to escape it at one point.
Yeah, it's scary as fuck. Almost the only way to endure it is to be a rabbi, and like, okay, I'm never gonna do anything else anyway. So. And
be in this whole madness. A rabbi is someone in a community. That's also like the imperfection excess around it would be the community then.
Right. Which makes him holy. Nothing can be holy without unholy beside it. Right. Except maybe Buddhist monks. Buddhist monks can be holy anywhere, surrounded by anything.
Yeah, they make everything holy around them, I guess.
But then again, do they even have gods?
No, they don't have gods. I mean, lots of Buddhist sects have God, but I mean, proper like Zen. What I consider Zen the purest Buddhism. I'm not sure if that's correct.
I wonder if Zen isn't too dynamic and too energyful to be akin to, in a sense, original Buddhism. Zen is so will to power coherent. Even though, I've heard that a Zen practice is to stand in front of a white wall, preferably in a wholly white room with no windows, and stare at like maybe a single point. That's very
forceful, you mean?
Forceful and white, very clinical, I guess. Just whatever is inside your own mind, nothing else. You don't see a tree in front of you.
I disagree. I think but that's not true. It is the actual beauty of the white wall and that actual point on it. It's not it's not an abstraction. You can stare with Zen. You can stare at a tree trunk or a stick, and the intensity of that beauty of that one object.
I take it back. Zen is awesome and beautiful, but it's almost as hermetic as it's not hermetic, but it's. Well, if you have Zen, you don't need anything else. So in a sense, you don't even need philosophy. It's an end. All Buddhism is an end, which is what is terrifying about Buddhism.
But also, what I like about Zen is that it doesn't care about any afterlives or renunciation. it's a moment. You can have a moment of Zen, and then you emerge from that. And it's also like one of the most Zen moments I had was in a mushroom trip when I just walked past a tree and decided with all my force to punch it, and I felt the bark. I really felt like it giving away. I mean, and I felt with communion with this tree at this point. I felt the wood and my bone connect, and my whole fist was really like purple, and nothing broke. But there was this just it is to me about wood and bone and stone. Zen is very hard. It's not about air. Anything that goes about music or there are these Zen koans about a guy sitting in a mountain, and he hears there's snow in the valley, and there's a chiming bell in the distance, and that's it. And that attains Zen, that transcends Zen. It's too beautiful, it's too sweet to be what I understand as Zen. And this Zen needs to involve pain, because the practice of Zen is like this zazen, the sitting. It's very strenuous, and this is about enduring. The Zen is very much this Dogen says about, that is the maxim of Zen, is all things are rooted in themselves, and to be able to feel yourself rooted in yourself, and to look at the same time as everything you discern is rooted in itself. I guess this value ontology in that sense is quite inspired by this Zen, because of course the self-valuing is the point of being rooted in itself. Have you ever looked at things like that, like in those terms?
Yeah, but I mean, one thing with me is that I had my drug trips were so what I would think is what Buddhism, like, so about non-reference,
Right.
So non-referential that any reference to non-reference other than my own experience seems to me lower, fake. So this is why I love words, and this is why I love philosophy as wordsmith. Because suddenly the challenge becomes, what can you do with this unworded, unreferential? What can you do with it by bringing it into words, instead of how can you refer to the fact of
Sure.
You know what I mean?
I agree, but that's a step beyond it. Me too. I've conquered the word in the sense, but from the position of being able to appreciate that it means, it's referenceless. I mean, I could not write as well as I do without having understood that words in itself. I mean, words are definitely not rooted in themselves. That's the things. Yeah, so they are not even things.
Or if they self-value, they say self-value as
something else than their reference. Yeah. So a word is its own sound and its look.
Well, and the whole self-valuing. I want to say self-valuing doctrine. That phrase came into my mind, but it's not that. It's the whole of self-valuing. The whole of self-valuing is terrifying. The whole of self-valuing is, like Nietzsche, very much more specific than people will think. And anybody that hears the term will not realize that it is much, much, inconceivably almost, much more specific than it might suggest to most people. It's about really specificity itself.
Exactly, and it is the fault of the word that it doesn't convey. I mean, you can't blame people for not grasping onto that. And in this sense, we have to develop at one point a term or something, or it could not be.
No, because it's not the term that fails. Value is one of the most eloquent terms I know about.
Because that it's necessary, because that incorporates the world. The value is that it's real. That's basically, because everything that's not value. I mean, that's not. I mean, obviously, it doesn't matter. So
Exactly. Yeah, it's great.
so yeah, but
But what you are referring to is a real problem, and I think it's not just coming up with a word. It's coming up with, not even coming up with a language, coming up with language creation.
that's more what I guess suppose. But I don't know how to express that. I mean, I have no idea what exactly what kind of shape that would take.
Yeah, me neither, I think. But I look at the past. This is why, I mean, you've said sometimes that I'm very about not respecting, or not tradition. Like, it has to be now, it has to be alive in a sense. But, for example, in a situation like this, I look back at genealogical processes that already exist. Like, this creating a language has been happening already for millennia. We're not really creating anything new by thinking about this. So maybe, but genealogy also, it doesn't tell you repeat the process. It tells you.
No, exactly. Wait, because it is all about specificity, and that's it occurs to me like now and then that of course it's about humans. It's about this philosophy is only about the person who thinks it. There's no point of trying to communicate it in general. This is why we're also starting on the internet, and why it's case by case, person by person examination and integration.
Thus reference.
What do you mean?
Thus reference. If it's about each person, I'm not trying to communicate you truth. I'm trying to reference something to you.
So that's yes. The person itself needs to become its own point of reference in a sense.
Yes. This is very.